Hello and welcome back to this Linux session on process management, and in the next couple of videos we are going to be looking at what a process is, what is process management, how to manage a process, get some terminologies around process management out of the way, and also have a look at some of the common process management commands such as PS, kill, BG, FG, jobs, nice, renice, and also have a look at what the top command can give us. And we'll try to wrap things up trying to understand the differences between daemon and process and service, with several examples on different processes and daemons running on the Linux system. So without further ado, let's get right into it. So what is a process? If you've been working on Windows and you're familiar with what Task Manager is, you wouldn't have a lot of problem trying to understand what processes are, because already you know what they are. You can open up a task manager on Windows and see a list of the different processes running on the system. So just like what we have on Windows, we also have that in Linux, only that you would have to check things out on the terminal to list out the processes running on the Linux system and then be able to manage them, whether you want to kill the process or you want to run it in the background or foreground. And we're going to go into details on how all those things work. Now, to start managing processes on Linux, I'm going to introduce you to the command called PS, and with the PS command you pretty much be able to list out what process is running either on your terminal or as the logged in user, or if you want to see the processes running on the entire system, whether it's the logged in user or other processes running that are not tied to any particular user or terminal. So with the PS command that I've just run, it's only going to show me the processes that are running in my current shell. Now, by saying shell, you might start wondering what exactly is a shell. Well, a shell is a program that takes command from the terminal or the keyboard and passes it on to the operating system to perform instructions on them. So every time we type a command like ls, it is the shell that takes that command, interprets it, sends it over to the operating system to interpret the binary, and then performs the functions that has been developed into the ls program. So what PS is doing is basically pointing out all the processes that are running in this terminal, which is my current shell. It's going to tell me the process ID, the TTY, which is the name of the terminal, and this terminal is PTS/0. If I opened another terminal, like if I click on this and I type in PS, you can see this is PTS2. And in this shell, I've only got the bash, which means born again shell. That's the name of the shell that I'm using for my terminal, and there are many types of shells. So PS is telling me I've got the bash, which is the born again shell, and the PS, which I've just run right here. So any process that is running in this shell is what PS is going to return back to me. So if we go back to our first terminal and run the PS again, I've got a number of processes running. I've got bash, I've got gedit, and I've also got PS, which is this one that I've just run. Now, to have a clean shell, let me kill gedit. The kill command is going to kill the process. I'm going to come back to that in a while. So let's do our PS again. And now everything is clean. So we only have the bash shell and PS. So this is what you're going to have anytime you run the PS command. Now, what if we need more information about the outputs that we're seeing? Well, there are a number of flags that the PS command takes, and we're going to go through them one after the other. So let's start off with PS-L. As you can see, we're still getting back the same processes, but now we've got a little more information, not just the process ID and TTY. We now have a couple more, and I'm going to go into detail of each of these ones in a moment, but let's just go through all the different PS flags and get you to understand how to use them. Now, there's another flag that we can use, which is similar to the -L, which also gives us much more information, and that is PS-F. Now, if you notice with this one, it's slightly different from PS-L because the UID is telling me the actual name of the user, and it's got an additional column here. Even though it hasn't got some of the columns in the ps-l, it's returning the data in a different style. So what you can do is you can combine both together and have the best of both worlds. So categorizing these three flags to PS, we can say this is categorized by the current shell. So these flags, you can always use them based on a categorization for the current shell. Now let's run another set of flags, but this time we're going to categorize it based on the current user. Now the difference between the two is I can be logged on as a user but have multiple terminals open or shells. So like I've got one here, I've got another shell open here, I've got another shell open here, and I can open a lot more and more and more. And if I do PS on this one, you can see my TTY, which is the shell, is PTS5. So the question is, what if I want to see all the processes running across my shells as the currently logged on user? So I'm going to clear my screen, and for that I'm going to introduce another flag, which is PS-U. As you can see, now we have all the processes running from all my open terminals, PTS 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 0. And 0 again, which is the PS-U. And all the different other terminals, I'm not really running any particular process. I've only just got the bash process running, and that's why you see bash everywhere. If I went into, let's say this one, and I open up Firefox, I could just type Firefox and open it. Just drag you to the side and go back here, clear the screen, and run PS-U. Now you can see that in TTY PTS2, I've got Firefox opened. But if I did PS-LF, it's not coming back because PS-LF is only going to restrict it to the current shell. So in this shell, I've only just got my bash, which is the shell, and PS-LF running, which is what I've just run. Whereas the PS-U is giving me back all the processes running across all the shells I've got opened as the currently logged on user. So take note of these differences. Now, what if I want to get my data based on daemons? Now, what if I want to get my PS output categorized by daemons? But you're going to start wondering, what exactly is a daemon? Well, the main difference between a process and a daemon is the fact that a daemon is also a process, except that it runs in the background. So for example, if we go back to that shell that has Firefox open, you can see that this is currently running in the foreground. And how do I know that? Normally you would see your shell blinking right in front of the $sign, but in this case it's blinking below it, meaning if I try to, let's say I try to type ls, nothing is going to happen. If I do pwd, nothing is happening because it's running in the foreground. It's taking over my terminal. I can't do anything. And so these cannot be categorized as a daemon. It's a process running in the foreground. Now, how do we send this Firefox process to the background so it can be categorized as a daemon? Well, there are two ways to this. The first way is to pause the program by sending it to the background and then starting it up again while in the background. So to do that, we are going to introduce Ctrl Z, and even though it's saying stopped here, it hasn't actually stopped the program. What it's done is it's paused it so that we can take control back of the terminal. Now, to start it up again in the background, what we need to do is to run the command bg. And if you notice this number right here, that's the job number. A job number is similar to a process ID, except that this time around we're categorizing it as a job because it's no longer going to be running in the foreground. So with a percent symbol and number 1 and enter, you notice that now we have Firefox with an ampersand symbol, which I'm going to get to in a minute. But to now be able to run our PS command, but this time to be able to see all the daemons running on all terminals, I would say PS-E. Now this is returning a whole lot of information because you can see the TTY section is not only showing PTS 2, 3 and all the open terminals, it's also showing some other processes that are running outside of shells. Now these are system processes that were started up in the process as a result of starting up the system, and that's why they have a question mark there, because they're not running on any particular shell. But if you notice here, we have our Firefox running in PTS2. How do we know this is PTS2? Well, with our PS command, it's going to tell us which TTY we're on. And with PS-E, we can see all the daemons running across all the terminals, and even those that are not running on any particular terminal. Now to run the same command again, but with a lot more information this time, we can do PS-E with F. Now you can see the output of this is a lot more verbose. Let's go to another terminal and run PS-E just to compare. So you can see this has just about 1, 2, 3, about 4 columns, and here we have a lot more columns. And it tells us, if I scroll all the way to the top just to see the column names, you can see the UID, the PID, the PPID, which means the parent PID, PID meaning process ID. And I'll explain to you the differences, and I'll explain to you the relationship between parent process ID and process ID in a short while. But for now, let's keep going through the different PS commands. But on the other hand, here with just PS-F, we only have the process ID, the TTY, time and command. Whereas with PS-EF, we have the same data but with a lot more information. Now there's one more flag to PS which returns the similar information, just like PS-EF, and that is PS-X. So let's go to the top and see what we have here. So this is PID, TTY, start, time, command. So it's relatively similar to PS-EF, because it's returning our process information across different terminals and the daemons that are running without terminals, except that it doesn't have some columns that PS-EF has. Now at this time, you're going to start wondering, so why do we have all these different flags that returning similar data? Well, to best explain that, let's go into the man page for PS. The man page is the manual for PS. You can read the description, which is a summary of what we've been talking about, but what I need you to focus on is this part that says this version of PS accepts several kinds of options, and these options are number 1, 2 and 3. So there's the first option that accepts Unix options, which may be grouped and must be preceded with a dash. The other one, number 2, BSD options, which may be grouped and must not be used with a dash. And there's the GNU long options, which are preceded by 2 dashes. To best explain what this is talking about, there are standards that define how flags can be used with PS. If you're anyone from the SQL world, it's just like saying the SQL ANSI standards and then the PL/SQL standard specific to Oracle and Transact SQL standard specific to Microsoft. So there are different standards that guide how to use PS commands. And that's why they're saying in this paragraph here that says that notes that PS-AUX is distinct from PS-AUX. The POSIX and Unix standards require that PS-AUX print all process owned by a user named X, as well as printing all processes. And then it goes further to try to explain the differences between 2 different standards and how the commands can be used. So here, POSIX and Unix standards. Essentially, you just have to get familiar with a particular standard and stick to it. So some standards you can say PSA, and some other standards you can say PS-A. You can see the difference is really clear. But what I've seen mostly is most people have a common way in which they get information about processes, one of which is PS-AUX. And with this, you get a lot of information that you can then pass grep into it and filter what you're actually looking for. So let's say I'm looking for Firefox. As you can see, that returns the process related to Firefox. Let me reduce that, bring it back. While some people just focus on using ps minus ef and pass that to grep as well, Firefox, and still you're able to get some data back. So it depends on what works for you, what you're familiar with, what you remember. You don't have to learn, you don't have to memorize all the different flags. It's just important to know what they do, why they're different, and just stick to what works for you. Okay, so this is where we're going to end this video. In the next video, we are going to start looking at the different columns for returned by our ps command and try to understand what each of those columns mean, so we can start interpreting the data that gets returned by it. I hope this has been informative for you. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.